All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to web design. Hopefully you guys are doing well and staying healthy like normal. Um, Today is kind of a miss and match we have with lecturing. So one of our amazing TAs, Bianca, will be teaching programming today, and then I'll be teaching design in the second half. So Bianca, take it away.
All right. All right, let me share my screen. Um, okay, cool. Is everyone able to see the slides?
Yes, sir.
Amazing. Okay, so this week we're going to be learning about Flexbox and layouts. And so just a few announcements as usual. So make sure your lab and your homework files are less than 20 megabytes or else they won't submit. And also just a friendly reminder that midterm project is due this Thursday for check-ins. And then the final project is due on October 20th. So you still have like 2 weeks for that. And yeah, as usual, submissions on the portal, and feel free to come to office hours anytime and just give us anonymous feedback at that link. So let's just review our box model analogy that we went over 2 weeks ago with Nick. And so remember that everything in HTML is a box, right? So whether it's a div, a button, or span, or text, or anything, it's basically just a box. And if we go back to our picture frame analogy, the green area here is basically all of our content. And here we have padding, which is the blue, which occurs inside the picture frame border. So that would be this line right here. And this padding goes around the content, and it's used to add space between the content and the frame. And then we also have our border, which is our picture frame. And finally, the margin, which creates space between our picture frame and other picture frames that we might have. And so, yeah, positioning things manually is a pain, as we learned in last week's lab and everything. And it's also just a friendly reminder that it's really important to think of these divs that we have as containers in a parent-child hierarchy. And so if we look at this example here, let's just go back to this screenshot of old Facebook that Nick went over 2 weeks ago. And so here we have like the main page and some content that you probably are familiar with. And so if we think of it as building blocks put together, we have the main page as the orange box, and then the page is made up of the two side columns, or the side column and the groups page, right? So that's the two yellow boxes. And then we have the header and the page content, which is the two blue boxes. And then finally, we have the newsfeed and the page details in the two red boxes. So how exactly do we get all of these containers into this arrangement, right? There's this layout of rows of columns, of rows and columns, and all this nesting. Well, that's what Flexbox is for. So yeah, this is just some of the code that we have to make all of this, but we still need to position all of it. So woohoo. So here's what a default container looks like. And it's flowing from top to bottom. And we have this red container carrying two small ones inside, and they're just default, stacked on top of each other. But we want to be able to tell them to be either arranged horizontally or vertically. And we also want to know if there should be spacing in between the boxes, if the blue boxes should be starting at the top of the red box or at the bottom. And so how we do that, yeah, all of these different configurations, right? So this is what I mean by starting from the top of the red box or starting from the bottom. And yeah, how do we get all of this? So we can do it with Flexbox. So we define the parent container to have this display flex property in CSS. And so that's basically telling them to listen to the Flexbox CSS styling. And then once we tell it to follow flex direction row, this is kind of self-explanatory a little bit. Row basically says everything inside of this best box div will be put into a row. So as you can see, suddenly child 1 and child 2 are being put in a row now. And then if we do row reverse, it also puts it in a row, but now 1 is behind 2. So we're going from right to left as opposed to left to right in our default row. And then if we do flex direction column, we can do this children stacked vertically. There's also child reverse, which would stack child 1 at the bottom and then child 2 at the top. So yeah, that's flex direction. So that's the first flex property that we're gonna learn. And then now, remember when I talked about like the nesting of like the rows and columns and rows? So how we do that in nested is basically now we have this one of our child divs contains two p tags called 3 and 4. So now we want to also define child to have the flexbox property, and then we also want to have flex direction row. So what would this look like? So we have our parent component, which we already knew about having the flex property, and then its children are in the row direction, and then same with the child. So here we have the children, and it's also following the flex property in going in the row direction. And now, so here's another flex property that we're going to learn. It's called justify content. And so what justify content does is it basically tells us how we want to allocate all of our extra space, and it allows us to align our elements along the main axis. So for us here, since we defined flex direction as row, the main axis is the x-axis, right? And so we're centering along the x-axis when we do justify content center here. And then when we do space between, it literally does as the property says, and it just creates space between the elements. So we're distributing the leftover space in the space between the elements. And here with space around, it creates equal space around each of the child components. So all of this is just like creating space around the elements. And yeah, so here's just a summary of justify content. We can see there's quite a lot of properties that you can start from the start, or you can go from the end. Center, we went over space between, space around, and space evenly. And so the difference between these two is that basically like this space here, it creates like half of the size of this as opposed to space evenly, which allocates even space around all of the elements. And we also have something called align items. And what align items allows us to do is align elements on the secondary axis. So if we have flex row going on, the secondary axis would be the y-axis, which is why we're centering these elements in like this way. Yeah, another example would be align items flex start. So now we're starting from the top of the box, and flex end would let us start from the bottom of the box. And yeah, so this is just the summary for align items, and stretch basically lets all of the children components take up the entire span of the container. And so if we want to combine justify content and align items, so this is an example of us doing justify content flex end, which means we push it all the way to the end for the x-axis, and then we push it all the way to the bottom for the y-axis, which is how we get this. And then if we want to do justify content space between, again, we're creating space between on the x-axis, and then align items center on the y-axis. So yeah, it gets a little confusing thinking about the main axis and the secondary cross axis. So here's some good diagrams for that. So when we have the main axis with flex direction row, the main axis is the x-axis, and then the secondary one is the y. And then when we have flex direction column, the main one would be the y in this case, and then the cross would be the x. Cool beans. Yeah, so this Flexbox practice is pretty much just a nice review of what we went over just earlier. So you can play around with the link here if you want. I'm just gonna go over to the demo because we have a demo later. But yeah, so here you can play around with we have the best box container, the child that we went over, and some the containers inside child. So yeah, I won't go into this because we saw the visuals for that already. Yeah. So let's say we have this like Discord invite that we want to like um change. So this obviously looks a little off. Something doesn't look quite right here. So we want it to look like this. So if we inspect element real quick, and let's pretend we're inspect elementing right now, we have this main component. And so this is the container containing all of the stuff inside. And then we also broke it up into this container. So this is has the logo and then the two like header texts. And then we also have a container within that. And so, yeah, this has the username and then that. And we also have a container for our buttons. So, yeah, let's try to fix why this looks so weird. So, yeah, you guys can also follow along in the whatchamacallit in this link if you have the slides open. But what we're gonna do is, so all of this is commented out, so let's not comment that out. Oh, okay, that's great. Yeah, so let's take care of the header first. So we want this text to be right along next to the logo, right? So what could we possibly do? So we know header contains the image and the text. So let's first create display flex and then, oh, great. Yeah, so now it's there because our default flex direction is actually flex direction row. So that's why it automatically pushes it up there already. And now we just want to make sure that like it's centered in the middle of this box because that's what our screenshot showed. So let's just do center. And so, yeah, some of the spacing is a little off, but let's just pretend for the sake of simplicity that this looks exactly like the actual Discord invite. And so now let's go ahead and switch the buttons. So again, let's just comment that out or take out the comments. And then let's do display flex again. And then it gets pushed all the way here. So let's justify content with space between. Just kidding. Let's not do that. Let's do a space around. Yeah, so that looks a little better. You could another like something similar could also be like justify content center, but like that would not give it enough space in between the two buttons, so they'd just be flush right next to each other, which we don't want. Here, I'll just show that too. Yeah, so that's what center looks like, but that's not what we want. And what looks most similar is space around. So yeah, there we go. And we fixed it. So yeah, it kind of looks like that. Another resource that's really great for practicing Flexbox is something called Flexbox Froggy. And so it's just really fun. Oh, cool. I'm already on level 3. But yeah, so like some of the other previous examples were like, if we want to just move the frog, here, I'll just, yeah, if I want to move the frog over to that, what would I do? Well, it's just like moving this with justify content and then like flex and there it is. So yeah, it's just assuming that this entire thing is a container. So yeah, this is a really good resource. Here's some more resources. This has some really good visualizations for Flexbox. And yeah, there's some other pretty good ones, but CSS Tricks honestly has probably the best Flexbox guide. And yeah, there's this. So Howie posted this picture, and I forgot what he posted, but yeah, now you can display flex direction on your friends, and I thought it was really funny, and so did 5 other people, so that's great. Yeah. Any questions? Cool beans. Yeah, and in that case, we're all done with the lecture for programming.
Okay, cool. Let's just get started. Hopefully you had a decent break to relax a little bit. But for design today, I'll be teaching you guys instead of Asia. I know, I don't even know if I'm qualified myself to teach design. She's a little bit too good for me. So, but anyways, today's topic is images and layouts. And I'm sure you guys have or have some knowledge in this, like images you've used, like you've heard of at least JPEG or like PNGs or GIFs, however you pronounce it. So we'll be going over what these mean in detail and what you should actually use and further layouts and things like that. So pretty exciting stuff. So part one, we're just gonna go through images and we're just gonna do a quick warm up and let's just talk about these websites. So you can unmute yourself, talk in the chat. Tell me, what do you think about this website by Giraffage? You could list anything that comes up in your mind. What are your opinions? Loud, ew, dizzy, very busy, looks colorful, noisy, the colors, oh my goodness, yes. Don't worry. Beautiful, okay, you know, we appreciate opinions from all sides. Yeah, well, I mean, if you think it's beautiful, good for you. Yes, background is crazy, everything's centered. So yeah, it's really interesting, this website. If you actually go, the link is here. Like it's an artist and they do this on purpose, so they understand. It's not like they don't have like a design team or whatever. But as you can see, it's like it's very tacky and wild, and you generally don't see this on normal websites. And it kind of looks pretty ugly and users can't really use it. So this website is very debatable, but again, if you think it's beautiful, to each their own. Yeah. So next up, let's see, what about this website? What do you think about Postmates? I'm sure you all used it. We're all college students. What are your opinions on their homepage? Yummy. Too yellow. It's a little bright, yeah. It looks creepy. Color contrast is bright. It's crispy. Okay. Clean. Beautiful also. I like your opinions, your variety of opinions here. Looks more of like an IKEA ad. Actually, wow, it does actually. Login part could be better. Weird. Drop shadows are cool. Yeah, so I guess generally from a user standpoint, we can agree that this is a little bit better. We'd probably prefer this than the previous website when we're using it. Like I know the yellow is a bit too flashy right now. You can go ask their design team why they changed it to this. But if you remember from Asia's color lecture last week, yellow actually does refer to food or eating in that sense. So colors are actually important, like Asia told us last week. So this is why Postmates uses yellow. And then also we have pictures of food in the background, which is relevant use of images. It's because we know Postmates is a food delivery application and they will deliver food from a phone app or a website, whatever. So they're like modern, and since it's like image heavy, we use a sans serif text that Asia also mentioned in the typography lecture. And the attention is generally focused. There's not much to focus on besides the middle thing to enter your address. Everything else is kind of like a background or like the nav bar, which is smaller. So there is a lot of visual hierarchy in this, and there's good macro and micro spacing in this thing. So a lot of things we've already taught, and they're being used in real life scenarios like this. So they're very important to keep in mind. So image uses. So when should we use images? So this is a website, Ueno, which is basically a website that showcases products like apps or whatever. And it's actually a really, really fancy website. If you go to it, like they'll have really cool animations and it'll look very clean. And this website is a very good example of image use because it really emphasizes on the image and what it means. So like, as you can see, we have a huge image that takes up majority of our screen and then very little text, but still does the job of showing like what it means. So we could say like, we have an image and we look at the first word Uber. Okay, we know it's about Uber now. And then all its other products, like it did one for Slack too. It has a picture of Slack, talks about Slack with in very few text. So image use goes a long way because like most people are visual learners, and it's easy for us to understand things through visuals. So the first type of image use is through thumbnails. And this is, you're very familiar with this as long as you went onto YouTube, Netflix, Qflix. Honestly, I don't even know what that is in this example, but these things have thumbnails, which are basically images or screenshots, because who would pick, like, if YouTube was in the layout of Google searches, like it would just show the title of the web page. Like, how are you gonna know like if it looks good or not? We're basically judging a book by its cover at this point. So that's why thumbnails are very important, because a good thumbnail might attract way more users than a bad one, or no thumbnail at all. So the definition of a thumbnail is a small representation of a larger image, and it's usually intended to make things easier to understand or manage a larger group of images. So if you take, like, there's two types of thumbnail layouts. First is masonry. This is like the Pinterest thing where it's like, it's in this column format, but it's not like uniform, like row wise, but it looks pretty good column wise. And then there's a grid layout for Instagram. You guys are all familiar. It's just a grid, a whatever by 3 grid of however many posts you made. So these are certain layouts we can use with images too. There are also 2 more layouts you can do, which is justified and standard. So justified is kind of like the opposite of masonry. So masonry is like good for like waterfall kind of ish thumbnails, because like it's uniform with column wise, but like justified on the other hand is the opposite, where it's good for rows. So there are pros and cons of using justified and masonry though, because like for justified, its pictures are generally better if they're like longer on their width than their length, because if you have a portrait picture, it's going to turn out very small. And then the opposite for masonry too. If you imagine like one is like a landscape photo, it's going to look pretty small compared to a portrait photo on masonry. So that's justified in masonry. There's also standard, which honestly is just like the picture is kept in the ratio it is, but it's just restricted to the certain container size. And it's pretty ugly because it does have like uneven margins and stuff like that. So try not to use this. Honestly, it just doesn't. The only good part is that it maintains aspect ratio, but that's like all of these kind of do that. So I don't see why you would be using standard in any case, unless you are Alaska Photographics. So yeah. Another use of images is through visual icon guides, or also known as icons, and these are also seen throughout many products and designs out there. So if you take a look at this example, this is a transit app in somewhere in Europe. And they really use a lot of icons, but it doesn't seem like it's like too cluttered or anything. Even though they have so many icons, it still looks really clean and very easy to understand. So we have like a train icon. Now, like we might know this, if we click on this, it will lead us to a train, like a trolley, same thing, a ship, car, like taxi or whatever. So these thumbnails also have a purpose. And I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. You wouldn't really put a car for like a train ticket. So icons are very important, but they don't take up much space, or they shouldn't. And there's also a lot of emotional appeal behind images. And these are like one of the things that also contributes to like personality or characteristics of a website. So if you go to this website of the kitchen, it's like basically using like images and GIFs that animate throughout the website whenever you scroll, and it brings the website to life. We know it's about the kitchen, but like now we have food images around it, things that we might have around in the kitchen, like a knife or like a fork. These will bring characteristics to your website. If we just had text and it's called the kitchen, like, it's okay. I mean, but you really want to get your point across and attract more users, and hopefully they'll come back to your product too. So let's get a little technical about these images. So these are the image formats that you might be familiar with. So first is JPEG, and these work well generally for natural image types. So like photography, nature, pictures, whatever you're interested. But they're prone to deteriorate as you save and edit them often. And I'll show you an example what I mean by like deteriorating in quality in like, I think the next slide or so. But they're also lightweight compared to PNG. So lightweight means like they'll take up less file size. So they'll generally be smaller in size, and they're generally best for large images such as backgrounds. And I'm sure like if you set a background in Windows or your computer or your laptop, they're probably JPEGs. On the other hand, for PNGs, these support transparency. So if you see like the tiled white and gray like background, that symbolizes transparency. That's what PNGs are for. And they're better at lossless comprehension. So that means they don't deteriorate in quality the more you save. But on the trade-off is that they're heavyweight, so they take up more space, or they're generally bigger in file sizes. And these are best for small images, such as like thumbnails and icons that I just mentioned, and then images, of course, with transparent backgrounds if you want that support. So there are times when you want to use different types of images. And this is good to keep in mind when you submit homework, especially your project, when you guys have a ton of images on donuts and your files, like your zips is like 100 megabytes. So now you know, like you might want to reduce your quality size or like change the image type. So this is what I mean by quality loss over the number of saves. So this is a JPEG. So from the top right or top left, we have like the first save. We just have the original picture. But the more we save or the more we edit it, we can see that like the quality of the image is just getting worse and worse. Like more specifically, you can see that we can start seeing lines in the skyline, in the sky. And that's not good because we could actually see the pixels in the pictures now. And that's what we mean by deteriorating in quality for JPEGs. So JPEGs will do this, PNGs won't. And here's a little comic of PNG versus JPEG. Like JPEG people are generally just ignorant, but you know, to each their own again. And then there's also images that support animations, and they're known as GIFs or GIFs. Gotta represent both sides. So GIFs are cool. They move. Like regular images don't move, but these do. And so you can actually show like cute animal GIFs on your slides or whatever you're showing. So GIFs, they're called graphics interchange format. You don't need to remember that. But of course it supports animation, but it only supports 256 colors. So like the general RGB value range, which is pretty unfortunate. But they're lightweight, so they don't take up file size, just like JPEGs. But the longer the animation is, the larger the file will be. Of course, if you like notice, like the longer you take a video on your phone, the larger the video will be. And it's best for animated images. So the question is, to link a GIF on a website, do we use the same command as if it was a regular picture? Yes, you would use the same image tag and like, of course, the relevant file path to that GIF instead of, so like now you like playing with the dot, whatever file ending it is. So like before for your homeworks, you might have done like .jpeg, .png. This one's just the same exact thing except it's .gif, and it'll show the respective GIF plus the animation on your website. So that's how you do it. So some really cool examples that use GIFs. This is a website called Work, and they use a lot of GIFs. I'll actually go to it because I really enjoy this website. Like, wow, like I would not be able to code this up. This is crazy. And there's also a lot of UI interactions that we can make with our mouse. And it's just wild, you know, like there's so many GIFs animations that they use throughout. If you guys have one of these websites for your final project, you can take my job as instructor. So yeah. So that was work. It's a really cool example, and honestly, I strive to achieve that one day, but that's a good use of GIFs and animations because it's very interactive, and again, it brings personality and characteristic to your website. And there's also usage for UI animation. So here we have an app that records like how long you want to sleep, I guess. It's like a sleeping app. And they have some really fun GIFs that bring personality to the app because it's all about sleeping. And they have like a sunrise, sunset kind of style. And it's really, really cool. And the colors really match the tone of like day versus night too. So at night, these darker colors might help you sleep a little better instead of like the warmer day tones. So lastly, there's a very important image format that we prefer you to use, and they're called SVGs, and they're called scalable vector graphics. So what does that even mean? It's basically a vector. So if you've taken math, like, you know, vectors can go any direction, whatever. And these are these are scalable. So they're full of different vectors that comprise into an image. So these can be scaled automatically without loss of quality. So if you take a PNG, for example, and you zoom in enough, you can start seeing like the individual square pixels on these images. But for SVGs, you don't have that. They will scale automatically for however much you want to shrink or enlarge them. And they're extremely lightweight, surprisingly. They don't take up a lot of file size, even if it's big versus like small dimensions. And it's very easy to customize with a code editor. It's actually, vectors are math, which can be coded up. And they also support animations. So this is like a JPEG plus a GIF plus a PNG. And it also supports transparency. And these can be exported directly from Adobe Illustrator and a lot of different other applications out there, but Illustrator is like the most common one. And so here's like a snapshot. We have just a simple image of a house on a hill. And you see like this looks like HTML, which it is. Like these are all vectors that can be coded up that you just design this in Illustrator. And once you export, they'll just give you this code and you copy and paste it into your website and it'll show up like the image. So it looks exactly, even though the code might look ugly, like you don't have to know what these dots and these numbers mean. You just copy and paste it and you'll get the image that you want. That'll be scalable, lightweight, transparent, and all these different animated features that you want for SVGs. So use SVGs if you can. So here's an example of a previous student's work on their final project. I think this was like spring 19 or something like that, a couple of semesters ago. So this was their final project that they chose to design, and they have a lot of use of images and SVGs in here and animations. So it's really cool that they designed this. So again, this is a masonry layout that they use for their photos. And this is the person's about, but they designed all this by themselves and for their final project. So honestly, you guys have no excuse of designing anything lower than this level by the time we get to the final project. So once we get to that point of the final project, don't worry, if you'll have enough knowledge to easily code all of these features up. It's only like halfway through just the semester, so you can be scared, but you should have all the knowledge by then. Yeah. So again, no excuses. And then there's more on image use. There's only use images that are context relevant. This is kind of self-explanatory. Like I mentioned for icons, you wouldn't put like a car icon for like a train ticket. So use images that are relevant. And they need to have a functional purpose. So if your website's about donuts, of course, you're gonna include donuts and not include like pasta or something like that. And then avoid using purely decorative images. I know sometimes that you might be tempted to because they just look good, but like the images should be there for a purpose and should serve a purpose. If they're just there for decorations, and if you take it out and it has the same like effect on the users, there's really no point in adding it. And sometimes they might be a little excessive and too flashy, even though it might look good to you. So try to really like understand what images you need on your website. And then use predictive visuals that have a strong relationship with the goals of the website, of course. That's just a fancy word for using relevant images. And they should also be tested for usability like any other element of UI. So that's an important thing to consider. So here's an example. This is like a personal medicine or pill kind of website. And they use a background image of one person holding their pills, and it has like the package that says "Hi Madison," and it clearly resonates with the purpose of this company because their whole company is about personalizing your medication in a package. That's why they have one person, not two people, holding the same package up. You know, this is unique to you, and these are the pills that you will take when you sign up with this company. And it's very simple too. Nothing too flashy like the giraffe background or whatever. And then there's also poor quality images. And please, I hope I never see one of these on your website at all, because there's really no excuse for you to not use HD quality images, because HD is really standard today. So yeah, please keep aspect ratios of images. There's no reason for you to only edit like one dimension and not both, and or reduce the quality so much that I can start seeing pixels. So please don't do this. It hurts. And stock photos, they're okay. Like generally you want to steer away from stock photos. They're just there because the purpose is for stock photos. But they're generally non-contextual. That's not related to like the website or the purpose. And they look very generic. They don't bring any like integrity or personality to your website because people can clearly tell it's going to be a stock image, especially if it has the watermark and you didn't pay for it. That's just, eh. So like they can save you time. You can find a random picture online for a stock photo, but if it's more genuine if you actually include a personal photo or like a good photo. So if like in this example, if you want to making a website for your company and you're talking about your team or whatever, why would you include a picture of 4 random pictures that are models instead of your actual team? Like how would that make like people trying to join your team like connect with you if they just see some 4 random people that they can clearly tell is a stock image? So it gives more integrity if you actually use a personal photo. And then there's also personality, like I mentioned throughout this thing. Personality gives you, it brings a lot to your website. Here's a website of Chegg, and I'm sure you guys have used it a lot before, but their purpose is like offering homework solutions or textbook solutions on their website if you pay the money, which I can't afford. So yeah, their image use is basically like a person in front of a laptop, probably studying, and these icons are very relevant to what the purpose is. Like textbook solutions is like a piece of paper with a check mark on it, and like so on and so forth. So it brings personality. Chegg is all about studying. They include studying images. There's also Course Hero, which is like very similar to Chegg, but they take this in a different direction than Chegg. You don't see much like real life pictures of an actual person. They have more 2D vector graphics that they use and a little bit wider range of colors. And it's very, honestly, in my opinion, more welcoming than Chegg, because Chegg is very just plain. And the colors are a little bit more harsh than Course Hero itself. And so I honestly use Course Hero over Chegg, even though Chegg produces better results. So yeah. And there's also Slater. If you probably use this for like looking up textbooks. This is another different type of personality. This is a more hip, kind of wildish personality for young hipsters who want to learn and study with textbooks, which honestly, I don't know why it doesn't really fit in my opinion, but they somehow mingled the two together. So it worked out for them. And there's also accessibility rules for image use. And contrast is very, very, very key to making sure emphasis gets across to the users. Like Asia mentioned last week when in the use of color. So I don't even know if you can see this, but like this part, it says, "Can you see me?" It's very vague. Just because the background is so light and the font is white itself, it just really doesn't mingle well. So there's also, you need to consider the contrast of the image versus like maybe text that might be on top. So here's another example of bad contrast. You're showing off your boat trip in the mountains or something in Canada, and you want to show like a header on the picture. So we had the word before here, but like the B, you literally can't see the B. That's the mountain is like the same color basically. So a way to resolve this, make the background a little darker. Now we can clearly see this header that says after, and therefore we've increased contrast this way. So this requires a little Photoshop CSS stuff, but blurring images also works, or you can add a text shadow to pop it out a little bit. But whatever brings contrast and allows a little bit better readability or usability for readers or users. Another way is moving it to a different part that has a darker background. Like you generally don't feel pressured to center text at all. There is no rule out there that says like you must center header text. So positioning can be played around with, and they could also improve readability and convey emotion. So that's why we put it in this bottom left corner. And we also changed the size. We made it much bigger, so it's much easier to see instead of just the small part that like on the tip of the boat that we saw earlier. So yeah, that was a lot. That was all of image use. So now we're just gonna get into layouts. Hopefully this will be a little quicker, but most products are designed with an F layout. And some of you might have heard of this, some of you haven't, but F layouts are basically the way things are positioned and the general flow of how users will read things. So on an app, we will have like things laid out vertically, column wise, because to show hierarchy, but within each column or row, they will have multiple different things that will be relevant to each other. So there's an F layout because users, when I read, I might just scan the header. I'm gonna scan over like these numbers real quick and then look down a couple like rows or whatever. So that's why we call it an F layout. So like I said, in words, I guess scanning is left to right, top to bottom. And that's, well, of course, if you read in English, there are some languages that don't follow this rule, which is an interesting read or research thing that people do. So if you actually have something that's interesting about that, let us know. We're actually interested to see what kind of languages don't follow this layout. So a general good idea is to structure your website based on the F layout because it's very natural and users are already used to this, like involuntarily used to it. And yeah, so you would want to place your like order of importance from like top left, top right, center left, center right, bottom left, bottom right in this order. That's why we like include, for a blog post, we include the title at the top and then the date right underneath and then the text underneath that. And then furthermore, if you want to add like things in a row format, it would go left to right from there. So this is an example of the Medium nav bar. So at the top for the Medium homepage, we can see like our F scan is going to be left to right on this nav bar. So I'm gonna read home first, and I'm probably not even gonna get to PC. I'm gonna read like halfway through, but that's still like an F layout because it's left to right, and I'm gonna go down from there. Same thing with Google Drive. They have an F layout, so they have a quick access bar, so I can see what I've accessed recently, and then I go down to see my actual folders or like my files in that folder, and so on and so forth. So there are exceptions to F layouts. Again, there is no rule that says that you must use F layouts. It's generally just very common. That's why most people use it. And so not all websites need to be styled this way. Like you do your own thing. If you want to be creative, go for it. So there are layouts that features like images on the top of the navigation and then also on like the bottom. There are nav bars on the bottom or nav bars on the side, left and right. It's really up to you. But the spotlight is definitely on the image to create emotional appeal because again, all users are like, or most users are visual learners, and images are what's gonna like really reach out to their experience. So one example is like the Z layout. There is a Z layout that I think Asia did mention in the chat. We're not going to talk about this in this lecture, but you could definitely look it up. There's that. So yeah, again, at the end of the day, it's up to you. It's your style, your choice. No one's forcing you to do anything. So for image resources, if you want to pull images off, there is Unsplash. We've used that. That's what Asia used to design Lab 3, the Figma thing. But please make sure to credit on a lot of these websites actually. So Unsplash, there's Noun Project, Font Awesome, and then flat icons. I really like flat icons too because they're really cute icons that you can use. But again, make sure to credit the author if you don't have like premium or whatever. So yeah, I think that's all. Does anyone have any questions about images and layouts? I know that was a lot, but yeah.
I had a question regarding like citing any images that we use.
Mm-hmm.
So for the midterm, like if we were going to use maybe like a generic icon we found on Google, like where would we cite it? And like, do you have specifics on where we get these images? Is it fine if it's from Google?
Generally you could cite it and you should cite it in your write-up. Just say like where you got these. You don't have to mention like the specific ones. Like, oh, this donut, sprinkled donut I got from here, or like glazed donut I got from here. Just say like I use Google Images or I use Unsplash to get whatever images, you could list them out.
So we don't need to like do like MLA citation or
Oh no,
anything.
yeah, yeah, there's no format citation for that stuff. Just as long as you kind of show us where you got it from in your write-up, it's good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, there are some copyright issues if you don't cite, and it could get you into a lot of trouble. So that's why a lot of people pay for premium, so they don't have to cite, or they just will cite it in their website somewhere, generally at the bottom, whatever. But yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, like Asia said, generally you don't want to use Google because there are a lot of copyright issues because they pull images through like wherever they want. So all these options we listed here, these are some really good ways to follow, and they provide really clean and HD quality pictures too. So yeah. Okay, cool. If that's it, then you guys are free to go. Thank you for coming out to week 5 today. And again, reminder that check-ins are due Thursday, so please get that in. Tomorrow and Thursday office hours are available, but they're probably going to be very packed. So please keep that in mind. But yeah. All right. Good night, guys.